Hey everyone, this is Nick from Mecha Warehouse, and today we're going to continue the Beginner's Gunpla Guide. Today's subject, grades and scales. So what are grades and scales? Well, in short, grades are basically the product lines from Bandai that represent a series of kind of features that are relatively similar along that line, and scales are basically how big the kits are. In more detail though, scale is basically, you can think of scale as a ratio. On Bandai kits, they're usually shown 1 over a number, and that is the ratio between the first number and the second number. So 1/144 scale, which is a really common scale, means that 1 inch on the model represents 144 inches in real life or in the media that's the kit is from. So 1/144 is kind of like saying 1 inch of your model is really 12 feet. 1/100 scale is kind of like saying 1 inch is a little bit, tiny bit more than 8 feet when you think about it, you do all the math out. Two other really common scales, 160, so thinking a little more like 1 inch is 5 feet, which is kind of crazy. And then 148 scale, 1 inch would be like 4 feet of real life. So obviously as that second number gets smaller, the kit gets larger. Now grades, we mentioned first, grades are kind of like, they're basically a bunch of features that are common between a line. There are a number of common grades. High grade, real grade, master grade, and perfect grade are the big four, the ones that are mentioned the most and are probably the most prolific. There's also entry grade, there's mega size, there's RE100, there's a bunch of other ones that are not necessarily called grades that also, kind of fit on this list. So starting on the low end size-wise, there's the 1/144 scale. There are 3 grades that are commonly in the scale: entry grade, high grade, and real grade. Entry grade is, as the name kind of implies, the entry point for a new builder. They are an entry-level kit. They're the simplest to build, easiest to build, theoretically don't require tools to build, and obviously you can go above and beyond with those kits. High grade is probably the most prolific line that Bandai has ever put out, being hundreds of high grades out there. If a mobile suit has a kit made of it, it's probably a high grade. There's usually master grades and other grades of those same kits, but high grade is the one that represents the largest selection of actual mobile suits within the Bandai lines. Real grade is a line of 1/144 scale kits that's intended to kind of represent what that mobile suit might look like in real life. And so it tends to be more detailed, more parts, much more difficult to assemble than a high grade, but kind of designed through that lens of realism and being realistic, so to speak. As we move up to 1/100 scale kits, the main 1/100 scale line is master grade. Master grade is personally my favorite. They're much larger because of that 1/100 scale. They got a good kind of heft to them. They tend to have an inner frame that you assemble, which real grades do as well actually, but they're a much more complicated build because of that inner frame. There's a lot more detail and they just tend to have more shelf presence. There are several other 1/100 lines as well. I mentioned RE100 earlier, so that's almost like a 1/100 high grade. RE100, at least to date, has been only UC kits, Universal Century, meaning things from the Universal Century shows and manga. On the other hand, we also have Full Mechanics, which is another not grade 1/100 line that tends to be IBO and more recently some Gundam Seed stuff. But again, it's like a 1/100 version of a high grade, so to speak. Additionally, there are other 1/100 scale kits that don't have any sort of grade or line designation at all. There are some 1/100 00 kits, for example, that don't have a grade listed on them, but are in fact 1/100, and they essentially fit into that same kind of space that Full Mechanics and RE100 do. That essentially 1/100 scale kit, not as complex or detailed as a master grade, but that same size and presence. As we move up to 160 scale, we come across perfect grades. Perfect grades are one of the least prolific lines in terms of grades. There's only maybe a dozen or two kits that fit into the perfect grade line. If you can imagine, because of their size and increased complexity, a lot of them make master grades look fairly simple in terms of inner frame, mechanics, gimmicks, things like that. They're much more complicated kits. As a result, they are way more expensive. They're much larger. The boxes are way larger, and there's a lot more in them. So it takes a lot more to design them. So they come out with maybe one perfect grade every year or two, which really accounts for that. Much less of them out there. So if you're looking for a kit, there probably isn't a kit of the mobile suit you want in perfect grade unless you want one of the most popular mobile suits that exists. We go one step larger and we actually have the mega size line, which is a 1/48 scale line. There's only, I believe, 3 mega size kits to date. There is an RX-78, the Zaku 2, which I think they did both in Char and regular Zaku colors, I believe. And then there is also a mega size unicorn. And as far as I know, there's only 4 that exist in the mega size line. These are much larger kits. They are way simpler. Again, more like a high grade, but massive. Kind of think large master grade or perfect grade size box because of its size, but very simple instructions. You can pretty much build one, in a few hours. They don't take much effort at all, but they are massive, impressive on the shelf, and great kits overall for that reason. One thing that I haven't mentioned yet is the SD lines. So SD, Super Deformed, is another kind of series of lines. There's actually, we'll probably do a whole video on the variety of Super Deformed lines that are out there with varying features and detail, but the short version is that Super Deformed SD kits are small, chibi proportioned kits, meaning, large heads, kind of comical proportions, not quite realistic at all, but more intending to be cute and kind of fun rather than realistic. These are often easy kits for beginners, great kits for kids, and there's a ton of SD kits out there as well, which makes them a great line. So it kind of covers all the different scales and grades. So recap, scale is basically the size of your kit. Grade is one of a number of different lines containing, kind of similar features along that line. And thank you for watching. If you have any questions, if I didn't cover something or didn't get enough detail, because this could have been a hour-long video if we were to cover everything in great depth, post it down in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.